All I'm saying is next time there's an apocalypse, I'm gonna want some salad. Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of Loki Episode 2, The Variant, which honestly feels like a kind of derivative and on-the-nose name. Come on, we can come up with something better than The Variant. Come on, guys, you're creative folks there over at Disney, at least I presume. So a poster of mine literally just fell at that exact moment. That was terrifying. That was Disney trying to get me. Holy crap. Anyways, now that I know Mickey Mouse is watching, let's review this thing. As always, I'll give my spoiler-free thoughts up front, and then we're going to dive into spoilers, and I know you're going to want to hear me talk about spoilers. Believe me, you're going to want to hear me talk about spoilers, because there's some stuff that I have thoughts on, given the, proclivities of the conversations that I typically have, and I don't want to say more than that without spoiling. So, to get into my spoiler-free discussion, what did I think of this episode? Well, this overall felt like a little bit of a slower-paced episode, like really trying to dip its toes into this world and universe to try and make sure that everything doesn't rush too fast. And we get a lot of that in the sense that there's a lot of reiteration of some of the exposition that we got in the first episode. Like, there was a lot of stuff where we sort of got reiteration of, like, how the time bombs worked, how the sacred timeline worked, different things like that, and how like Nexus events worked, just sort of making explicit some of the stuff that was either said or just sort of glossed over or implied in the very first episode. For me, as someone who picks up on that stuff fairly quickly, because I read a lot of science fiction, I read a lot of this stuff, and watch a lot of this stuff, it was sort of like a little bit dull for me to sort of see that stuff repeated a little bit here, but I also understand that this is kind of a very trippy and heady sort of concept and idea, and so I like that they're sort of setting the rules out and making it very clear how everything is set up. And I think that works to this episode's benefit overall, even though I personally found it a little bit dull, because there are some really clever ways that they start to use and play with these rules. Like, there is a sort of a way that Loki figures something out in this episode that I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense given the rules that you have set out. And that was just really cool to kind of have that sort of naturally flow from the concept. So a lot of fun there. But like I said, a little bit overall, this did feel a little bit slower paced than last episode and sort of the other Marvel shows just in general. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but with the second episode, I did kind of want to hit the ground running a little bit more, though it does pick up a lot in the back half of the episode. However, what this slower pace does allow us to do, besides just giving us a little bit more exposition, is really delve a little bit into the status quo for Loki and how he feels about everything. We really get the sense that, last episode he was sort of a fish out of water very clearly. He didn't know what was going on. And now that he's started to figure out the rules, we're getting the sense that he's, not used to being in this position where he is pretty much completely powerless and people can read right through him. Yes, we get a little bit of that with like Thor being able to read right through him and other people around him in the Thor movies, but generally Loki at least has some way to manipulate people. He at least has some sort of power and at least some sort of extra play that he can make. And here he doesn't really have that. And so it's nice to sort of see this new dynamic for Tom Hiddleston to play off of Loki, and you really get the sense of insecurity that just you got from other Thor media that Loki's appeared in, but really shines through here. So all of that was really, really good character work. We also got a lot more of Mobius. Mobius. Oh my gosh. Why? I keep wanting to say Morpheus because I guess I'm very excited for the Jared Leto movie, but Mobius, we get a little bit more about him as well. And I really like seeing his characterization of someone who is, wanting to be trusting, likes getting excited, but also, is smarter than he initially appears when dealing with Loki, but, might have a soft spot for him. And I don't want to delve too much more into that because we'll get into some spoiler stuff, but I really did like Owen Wilson's portrayal here. I think he's doing a great job of giving us a fully fleshed out character here, and a lot of fun with that. And then to wrap up my spoiler-free thoughts, like I said, and this is going to sort of like start getting us into spoilers, but don't worry, I'll let you know explicitly when, but the end of this episode, like I said, really, really picked up, and there was some really, really cool stuff and interesting ideas at play that get brought up in the final moments of this episode. I was sort of expecting one of the big reveals that happened at the end of this episode, but the other one really shocked me. And so I was kind of surprised by that. So even for someone who was, thought I was a little bit ahead of the game, I was not completely. And so I'm kind of excited. I'm actually very excited to see where episode 3 goes. But with all that being said, those are all my spoiler-free thoughts. So if you have not seen the episode yet, or you don't want to get spoiled, step away, go watch the episode, and come back, because I will be here, because there is a lot to discuss with this. All right, now that we're in spoiler section, I have got a lot to say, and I'm going to save the sort of big conversation that I want to have towards the end of this video. Clearly, the revelation that the variant Loki is Lady Loki, or at least a girl version of Loki. I have many thoughts about that. We will get to that in just a second, but I'll save it for the end of the video. But let's talk about a few other things first. I loved seeing the opening gamble with this episode with the Ren Fair, sort of like kind of a little subversion on the time variant stuff, sort of being like, oh, we can go anywhere in time, but we're going to, we thought we were going to be in medieval times, which is actually a Ren Fair. Also, by the way, did anyone see Jacob Geller in there? I know it wasn't Jacob Geller, the YouTuber who I really love, but one of the extras in the Ren Fair just looked exactly like Jacob Geller, and I just could not get that out of my mind for some reason. Anywho, like I said in my spoiler-free section, I loved seeing Loki sort of being a little bit fish out of water, trying to figure out how he can gain power and play for power throughout this entire section, like when he's basically doing the CSI Loki movement and like putting on sunglasses and like looking around and stalling for time. I really liked, like, you could read through him, but you could see he was trying a tactic. He was trying to do something, and that's very Loki. He's like trying to figure out like where he can like nudge and poke and prod, and he just sort of plays around until he figures out what that thing is. And I really, really enjoyed sort of seeing them and then having him fail at it, because that's not something unless he's dealing with Thor, that's not something that usually happens to him. So that was really, really fun to sort of see that new dynamic that he's being played with, and Owen Wilson just getting very, very frustrated with him. I loved the scene between the two of them where Loki they're about to enter the elevator, and Loki says like, why are you trusting me? And Owen says, Owen Wilson, Mobius, I cannot get that right for some reason. I don't know why that's not getting my brain. Mobius says, I'll give you two options. Either a scared little boy and I have pity for that, and it's running out of pity and running out of sympathy, or I am or I don't care and I just want to use you. And I just like this sort of like constant, we don't entirely know where Mobius sits, but I like that we eventually sort of get this idea that he is someone who really gets excited about this stuff, really wants to trust Loki. It was really putting himself on the line. I like there's like small subtle moments, like when they're about to go into the apocalypse at the end of the episode, where he hands Loki his knives, and one TVA agent is like, absolutely not. And you just get, he's like excited. He wants, he is like a Loki fan, even though he is tempering himself. It shines through in these like small little character moments throughout. And I really, really enjoyed that. I think that was really, really just, again, small subtle stuff with him that I really enjoyed. I also like later on in the episode when they're sort of like, looking for the final variant at the hurricane, in the hurricane, set piece. He says like, these people are scared. Don't treat them badly. And the TVA guard's like, they're gonna be dead anyways. Why do I care? And Mobius does care. Again, small little subtle hints that maybe he's not exactly the perfect TVA agent that he's sort of seen to be and tries to put up as a facade. And that goes into probably one of my favorite scenes of the episode, was the philosophical conversation between Mobius and Loki after they sort of figure out the apocalypse thing, which I'll talk about in a second. But they have this like philosophical conversation about how Mobius and Loki, just about free will and about like belief and the meaning of time. I mean, I could probably do a deeper dive into that conversation and just sort of sit with it and rewatch it. On a second watch, so I'll probably have a lot more thoughts on it, but that's the type of conversations that I really like. And I love this bring up of free will and this idea that Loki's pushing Mobius and saying like, do you really believe this stuff? Is this stuff that like you really think is true? Do you really believe in these like lizard people? And I think that Mobius brings up this point. It's like, oh, Loki, you were born by Odin, you were born by these gods. I mean, it's crazy stuff. But I'm also surprised that they didn't bring this up, but it sort of subtly implied that Loki's like, yeah, but like Odin was just a dude, and so too with the Timekeepers is probably the case. They're probably just people doing stuff. And I also like the implication we're not seeing them, and there's an earlier conversation between Owen Wilson and the judge lady, Ravonna, excuse me, I'm looking at my notes here, Ravonna, where she's like, oh, they're really looking in on this. I'm getting the implication that probably the Timekeepers don't exist, or maybe don't exist, or are clearly there's something that we're, that is more than they appear. They're not just going to be these three lizard people, whatever, but they're going to be a little bit more than meets the eye here. And you might even get I get the implication that they may not exist at all, that there is no sort of timekeepers and they're all just doing it for nonsense. And so Mobius is sort of and just trying to keep order for order's sake, and Mobius is sort of bought into this, and that'll eventually lead Mobius to sort of be like disillusioned with this whole thing. And I'm betting you one of the final scenes in the final episode is going to be Mobius on a jet ski. I bet you if it doesn't end tragically, if there's a happy ending for him, it's going to be him on a jet ski sort of being like, screw order, let's go with chaos, or finding some sort of balance between the two. And I like the implication here too that like these TVA agents don't have lives outside of this. We could have got a hint of that last episode with Rutherford, by the way. Thank you for pointing out, everybody, that it was Rutherford from Lower Decks who was playing that one TVA agent. I knew I recognized his voice from somewhere, which that was adorable. But I like this implication that they're sort of like born here and don't really know much outside of the life of the TVA. Like I have so many questions about where these people were born. Were they born here, and what life have they known besides this? And so I like this implication that Mobius has never really gotten a chance to do anything other than TVAing. Like, was he born an adult? Like, so many interesting questions with all of that, and sort of in questions implied by when Loki goes to like look up files and sort of says like, I want to see the beginning time, I want to see the end time, I want to see stuff on the timekeeper, all classified. Just some really cool ideas and implications for Owen Wilson's character and just sort of the TVA in general, and just a lot of ideas being brought up within this concept, and I really like that. The other thing, too, with this that I really deeply enjoyed was the apocalypse thing. I said this during my spoiler-free section, but I really loved that this idea of, like, that you could hide out in apocalypse because, you wouldn't vary the timeline at all, and so there would be no way to trace you because you could do whatever you want, but then the apocalypse would wipe everything out. I loved that because that came out of all the rules that we had established so far. That is some of my best and my favorite science fiction writing, where you set up rules, you establish your rules, and then you don't break them. But not only that, it's not that you don't break them, you find interesting set pieces and ways to play within the rules that you have created. And this apocalypse bit was just, I liked that, and I liked that Loki was the one able to figure it out, that he was sort of be able to have that sort of like extra thinking that a TVA agent wouldn't, because they're like, we don't want to make any variations to that timeline whatsoever. And sort of Loki sort of finding that you can have chaos, you can do crazy things inside the sacred timeline, because there's different ways to do that. Again, finding chaos within the order. I think it's like subtly hinting at the themes, while also being a clever subversion of the rules, and also showing that Loki does add to this investigation when he really wants to put his mind to it. And I think that was just a lot of fun, and I deeply think that was just absolutely awesome. Also, the scene where they're at Pompeii was a lot of fun. I deeply enjoyed that. I was looking around to see if David Tennant or Jon Snow was going to show up at some point, but what are you going to do? Points for anybody who knows those references that I was making. But this finally brings us to the final big discussion, the big reveal at the end of the episode, that the variant Loki is, of course, what many people were guessing, what the big thought was going to be, that the variant Loki is, in fact, Lady Loki, a female version of Loki, which is sort of playing off of this idea of Loki being gender fluid that was sort of hinted and alluded to earlier on in the promotion of Loki, and that Tom Hiddleston himself was sort of talking about that Loki has always been gender fluid, and this is sort of based off of not only the comics, but also, the presentation of Loki in actual Norse mythology, which is awesome. I love my gender fluid Loki, one of my favorite parts about the character. Just in general. And so I'm glad that that's sort of being brought up here within the actual MCU itself, and this might be a chance to have the MCU feature a sort of member or of the trans umbrella, we'll sort of say, if you want to consider gender fluid as part of the trans umbrella or non-binary umbrella, but somewhere close to that, gender non-conforming, however you qualify that, I feel like it kind of still fits within that sort of family of the trans umbrella, and would be really cool to see within this world. I am hesitant, however, to see how they're going to play the gender fluidity of Loki, because they could do it several different ways here. There's sort of the one way, which is that Lady Loki comes from a universe where Loki just happens to be a girl and has always been presented as a girl, which I feel like would just sort of sidestep the issue. I mean, it's multiple timeline sort of stuff that we're going on with here, variants and things like that. So like a universe where Loki was born a girl, I could buy that. It wouldn't be problematic or make an issue. issue with anyway, but would sort of skirt this issue of, actually discussing Loki as a gender fluid person. It would just be like, oh, yeah, there's a guy Loki and a girl Loki. The other way that they could do it would sort of be that this version of Loki was, presented as a man, was seen as, had a more masculine presentation at some point, but then because of just her gender fluidity or however she wanted to present, she's just like, I'm presenting as Lady Loki today, or just, I'm choosing to do that and sort of fitting within the gender fluid idea. That would be the way that I would prefer, that she's just someone who, just plays around with her identity. That's kind of what at least some versions of gender fluidity are. However, there's a few other ways that they could do this that could end up being problematic. Like one that instantly comes off the top of my head would be like, oh, she's, also, she is a guy Loki, but she's just putting up the illusion of a girl to throw people off. And that would sort of implicate that like, oh, trans people, gender fluid people are just like men underneath, like men in dresses sort of things. That's one implication I could come up with off the top of my head. There are a few others, and I'm not going to go through all of them and think out all of them, because that's just we're going to have to take it as what happens in future episodes of this show. So basically, my ultimate point with sort of describing all of those to you is sort of being like, I am very excited to see how they present, Lady Loki, and I think that they could do some interesting stuff with that, not just in terms of just, plot-wise, but in terms of representation. And I am very curious to see how they handle it. I'm also curious to see how Loki, our Loki, Tom Hiddleston Loki, will take this. He's going to be like, oh, look, I'm a lady. That's really weird. Then that would also kind of bug me as well. So I'm excited, but tentative, because the MCU has not proven that they can really do LGBTQ representation of any kind super, super well, at least to this point, at least in the movies or sort of main MCU products. So I'm excited, but tentatively so. So we'll sort of see how it goes, and we'll talk about it more as that comes up. Also, the other thing too is I kind of was hoping, or at least thought, maybe hoping is the wrong word, but I sort of was guessing that the flight attendant from the first episode was going to be Lady Loki, but I couldn't really tell if it was the same actress. It might be, but she looked a little bit older than the flight attendant from the first episode. So I was kind of hoping that would be the case, that it was just sort of like, setting that up to sort of set her up down the line and maybe raise some questions, but I couldn't really tell, but I don't think it's her. So, sadly, that's my theory off the table. But this gets me to the final big thing about this episode that I was not expecting at all. Like, I thought the big reveal was going to be Lady Loki, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I kind of thought. But then the other big reveal was the fact that Lady Loki was taking all those bombs to blow up the sacred timeline, thereby creating free will, essentially creating chaos from order and sort of defeating the whole purpose of the TVA. Fascinating and so cool, creating this chaotic moment. That's not something that I would have thought would have happened this early in the series. That's something that I would have thought would have been like, second to last episode of the series sort of stuff. Because this feels like this is what the MCU is doing to try and set up the multiverse idea for the MCU going into Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So just this idea that, the multiverse has been created now, or like things are branching off. Like maybe they'll be able to heal it by the end of the series. But I don't think that that's going to be the case. My theory would be that this show is going to be about, mixing the order and the chaos. It's about, Loki represents all the chaos, TVA represents order, and there needs to be a balance between the two. You need to have some level of both. And so I feel like there's going to be like, we're going to have multiverses, but only so many sort of idea. And so I'm sort of curious to see where this is going to go and how that balance is going to be found within this story. And so I'm deeply fascinated, and I was very shocked to see that this moment happening so early on in this show. And then Loki going after Lady Loki. Obviously, I think he'll be coming back to Owen Wilson at some point, whether it be on opposite sides or together. I think will be sort of interesting to see. But the ending of this episode excited me in many ways, and I was kind of surprised. So overall, while I did find this episode, at least towards the beginning half, to be a little bit repetitive and a little bit slower paced, overall, I think this, if my discussion alone didn't elucidate that, I think there were so many great ideas, so many great themes, great performances, great just concepts within here, great surprises within here. I am very excited for this show. Both of these episodes, while not without their flaws, have been fantastic, and I am so excited to continue watching the show. This continues to be, and I've said it so far, but this continues to be something I'm very pumped about and might be one of my favorite things that the MCU produces. It has the potential to be. Anyways, I don't want to over expectation it. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm intrigued and excited so far. So, But what did you think, though? That's enough of me. I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. Don't forget also to subscribe to this channel and also my main channel, Jessie Gender. I will be having a video go up today as well over on my main channel. It's a sort of a, surprise one, but I think it's one that'll be about a very important issue, so go check that out if you get the chance. I also have a video coming out on Friday for my birthday, which will also be a lot more fun than today's video, which is a little bit more serious. I also have a Patreon page where you can help supporting me doing what I do. But beyond all of that, I just hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.